Aloha, welcome to this week's video. So this week I am finishing up the last piece for the set of weapons that I was making for a client. This last piece here is a Hawaiian style knuckle duster, or kue lima mano. So there's a big difference though between the Hawaiian knuckle duster and like a traditional knuckle duster. The Hawaiian piece was really more of a slashing weapon, less designed for punching, and more as like a blade that just wrapped. Now, obviously, once the shark teeth break off, you still have a blunt force weapon, and you can use it the same way that you could a regular knuckle duster. But its first primary function is for slashing, similar to a blade. So the first step here is I cut out the outer edge. Normally what I do is I drill a bunch of holes in the inside and then connect the holes. This time though, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. I'm just using kind of like a router bit on my Dremel here to cut it out. And so it was kind of a hassle. It was a little bit of a hassle because I had to be careful. If it gets too much of a bite, it vibrates and it would chunk out some of the surrounding koa. I am cutting it out a little bit loose so it's not as bad, but all in all though, it actually in the end saved me a bunch of time. I didn't have to do as much cleanup. Usually I have a ton of cleanup that I have to do on the knuckle duster after I cut out that internal section, but cutting it out first with that worked really well. So I'll probably do that again on the next one of these that I make, although I don't usually make these too often. They use up a lot of material and they can be a little bit of a hassle to make, and so I don't make them too often. But the nice thing about them is there's not a whole lot of shaping. It's a fairly simple piece. So it is going to have a lanyard. So that's this next step here before I get onto a little bit more shaping, is I'm going to be cutting in the lanyard hole. I'm not going to put feathers on the lanyard. I don't really like putting feathers on this style of piece. I just don't think it matches. It doesn't fit well with the overall design. So the next step here is going to be cleaning up the inside of this. So I'm using a wooden rasp first, not a wood rasp first, and then I'll get my sandpaper and rough it out with the sandpaper, and then the whole thing will just be continuing sanding down. The step passing that I'm going to be doing on this, I'm going from 150 grit, which is your lower grit, up to 320, and I'll be ending with a 320 grit sandpaper. And for those of you that don't know, the higher the number on your sandpaper, the finer the grit. And so as you move up little by little, it gets smoother and smoother, and the surface becomes cleaner. You can't jump too fast on your sandpaper. If you do, you won't be able to sand out all of these scratches. So each grit of sandpaper has abrasives, and they're larger. And so if you go from like 100 grit to 320 grit, the scratches that the 100 grit left will be too deep, and the 320 would just take forever to sand those out. So you use 100 grit, and then 150, and then 200 or 220, depending on what type of sandpaper you're using. So you just work your way up, and that way it evenly smooths out all of those grooves. The next step, once I have it sanded down, right as of this point in time, I think I have it sanded down already to 320, but I'm cutting in the outer groove. It's going to go all the way around the outside edge, and I'm using a tungsten carbide bit, and just cutting that in deep enough so that when I set in the teeth, they'll fit nicely in that groove. And then I'm going to go ahead and keep sanding. Actually, I hadn't sanded it down to 320. I was down to 220, and then I'm finishing 320 after that. There's not a whole lot of complexity on this piece. It's a fairly simple piece, which I kind of like, actually. I've made some of these before that had more flashy designs, but I kind of like the simplicity on this style. It just feels more natural. It would just be a powerful piece that you definitely wouldn't want to get hit by. So now that I have that sanded down to 320, I'm going to go ahead and set the teeth. Just like all of my other pieces, I'm putting in just a little bit of epoxy mixed with coal wood shavings. That helps hold the teeth in place so that when I go to drill and tap the piece, it's just easier. as well as lashing. It makes lashing quite a bit easier too. And I'm using my tungsten bit on my Dremel to punch in holes into the teeth. And then I usually punch those holes in the root of the teeth so that the outer edge, the enamel, the stronger part of the teeth doesn't have any cracks in it. And then I mark where I'm going to be putting in the lashing. The purpose of the nail here is just to start that hole just a little bit, and it keeps the bit from walking. Otherwise, you have to be really careful so that the bit doesn't walk, especially if you're on a slanted or non-flat edge. And so that little starting groove helps with that. And then once I get that sanded down, I'm going to go ahead and clean out the excess glue from the epoxy and get it ready for oiling. Now my camera wasn't turned on, and I didn't realize that until I was 90% done with oiling the piece. So it's almost already finished being oiled. I apologize for that. It just happens sometimes. Didn't even notice it until it's too late. So the koa wood here is not an extra curly koa, but it is a darker koa. And I really like the aesthetic of that. It looks really nice. It's just a really beautiful, simple piece. So this last couple steps here are just going to be lashing. I'm going to be lashing in the bull shark teeth. So normally I use tiger shark teeth for the majority of my pieces. I'm using bull shark teeth on these. So the bull shark teeth look more triangular, kind of like great white shark teeth, whereas the tiger shark teeth have those curved, serrated edges. So they do look quite a bit different. And the lashing pattern I'm doing here is just a triangle pattern. And you'll see that as the piece is finished, but the crossover makes a triangle shape on both sides. And so it looks more uniform. I'm only doing a single lash. I'm not doing a double lash on these. I only do a double lash on certain pieces just because it takes quite a bit longer, and it's not really as needed because the cordage here is a lot stronger. Traditionally they would do like a double or triple pass through or ply, but that's just because the cordage wasn't as strong. You're using natural cordage, which is strong but not as strong as modern cordages that you can get. And then the last step here is tying in the wrist strap. Now I do a 5 or 6 ply on the wrist strap, but that's just to make it thicker, and so it feels better around your wrist, doesn't gouge into your wrist. And here is the final or finished piece. So it is definitely a lot more of a simple design compared to a lot of the other pieces that I make, but man, I love the way that it feels in the hand. It feels really good. It's got a hand swell on a slight palm swell, and then the swell around where your fingers reach, so it just feels good in the hand. It locks in. And I did do a little bit of testing. It'd been a while since I'd done some testing with some pieces, and so I wanted to get out my Ballistics gel and go ahead and test this piece out. So I tried to mimic some of the slashing motions that you would use. So you would slash towards soft targets on the neck or on the stomach, inside of the arms. And I'm really not putting too much force, maybe 60-70% force. And even with that little bit of force, it just slices. So this would just be an absolute beast. And the teeth are probably a good 3/4 to an inch in length. And so it's a good inch deep gash that you would get wherever this sliced. So if that's on the neck or on the arms, you're going to get tendons or veins. So it'd be pretty powerful. But this was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed making this piece. If you liked it, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe and a comment below. I have some awesome pieces, some custom pieces coming up, so I'm super excited about that. But until next time, I'll see you later. Aloha.